Hare Krishna everyone, thanks for joining. We will be starting to read from Śrīla Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta today of Śrīla Rupa Gosvāmi, and it's translated from the original Sanskrit with commentary by Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamam mande shigurum deen tarinam parmanantamadham Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So let's begin with the foreword for the book. Rupa Gosvāmi is one of 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, one of the ascetic devotional scholars entrusted with intellectually systematizing the popular revival of Krishna Bhakti by the 16th century charismatic Sri Chaitanya, considered an incarnation of Krishna by his followers. Sri Chaitanya triggered a wave of Krishna devotionality across parts of India, featuring meditations on Krishna's early pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto and its derived literature. Although Sri Chaitanya personally recorded only 8 verses in writing, which we know as Shikshashtakam also, he inculcated to some of his followers, most especially Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, an elaborate theology of Krishna Bhakti featuring the various types of moods and relationships with Krishna that could be cultivated through devotional practices. Thus a school was formed around Sri Chaitanya's life and teachings that came to be known as Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition, also known as Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. The 6 Goswamis, especially Rupa and his elder brother Sanatan, were entrusted with recording the teachings of Sri Chaitanya, and along with their nephew Jiva Goswami, became the primary theologians and most prolific authors of the tradition. They produced a textual corpus of literary and philosophical works dedicated to Krishna, and in effect created the entire primary canon that lies at the core of the Gaudiya Vaishnava scholastic tradition. Rupa is perhaps best known for his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, a treatise on the moods, that is the bhavas, and the devotional experiences, that's the rasas, attainable at the highest stages of Krishna Bhakti, as well as for its sequel, the Ujjwal Neelmani, on the highest bhava madhurya. He also wrote a small handbook on bhakti practice, the Upadeshamrita, which we've read as when Prabhupada translated it as Nectar of Instructions, and that Madhurya Bhav is the conjugal bhav or the rasa. He also wrote a small handbook on bhakti practices. Deshamrit, his brother Sanatan, produced a large tome called Brihad Bhāgavatāmrta, a book that moved Rupa to write this shorter sequel, the Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta. As we will see from this text, the task of the theologian, and this is the raison d'etre of theology in any tradition, is not just to record a new set of religious revelations, but to situate these in the intellectual context and scholarly milieu of the day and age. This entails engaging the established epistemologies and scholarly methods and protocols of the time. In other words, for an emerging tradition to be taken seriously by outsiders, it needs to establish its credentials. For the Vedanta tradition within which the Gaudiyas locate themselves, this entails hermeneutics, interpreting the established body of scripture recognized as authoritative by the greater Vedanta tradition in such a way as to accommodate the new revelations. Put differently, the Gaudiya tradition lays claim to previously unrevealed truths imparted by Sri Chaitanya to the Goswamis, especially Rupa and Sanatan. Since Sri Chaitanya is deemed an incarnation of Krishna by his followers, his teachings are considered supremely authoritative in their own right. But Sri Chaitanya and his followers were not simply committed to promoting and propagating a new revelation on its own merits. but to proving that this revelation is not only fully supported by the enormous existing classical Sanskrit textual tradition Veda, Itihas, Puran, and Sutra, but is actually its culmination. The Goswamis were entrusted with demonstrating this. This is not easy feat. The highly elaborate network of devotional relationships and moods that can be exchanged and cultivated between various categories of devotees and Krishna, as taught by Sri Chaitanya, is nowhere explicitly set out even in the tradition's primary text. The Srimad Bhagavatam Puran, nor does the text clearly schematize the complex web of relationships between the multiplicity of divine manifestations and avatars of Krishna himself, nor present a comprehensively systematic hierarchical map of the various abodes and divine realms they inhabit. Indeed, even the divine Brahman realm of Golok, the ultimate destination of the entire tradition, where devotees strive to gain residence so as to engage in eternal rasa with Krishna, receives only a cursory mention in the Bhagavad, the scripture par excellence of the tradition. And what then to speak of locating this entire vast and highly intricate spiritual universe in the larger textual corpus of the Shruti and the Smriti, which a Vedantist would need to do in order to be taken seriously outside the community of believers. Taking on such project requires remarkable exegetical skill and erudition. The new revelations must be presented as being implicit and concealed in the Bhagavad, just as Krishna himself is concealed in the Shruti corpus, specifically the Vedas and Upanishads, so as with all predecessor interpreters of Vedanta, the task of orthodox exegete, or is it exegete? Please excuse my pronunciation, is not to pronounce some brand new teachings, but to locate and extricate the new lineage teachings from their seed forms lying hitherto undetected or underdeveloped in the existing sources. In other words, absolute truths by definition cannot be created or freshly composed. They are eternal and embodied in the eternal Vedas. But by dint of already existing in dormant or concealed state in these sacred texts, they can be progressively revealed at various times in human history, usually by divine avatars or the incarnations. This is how the followers of the Gaudiya tradition understand Sri Chaitanya's teachings of the Krishna Bhakti, distinctive of this school. The 6 Goswamis rose to their assigned task of identifying and excavating the various hidden ingredients of the Gaudiya theology from the vast corpus of Sanskrit literature. The sheer depth and breadth of erudition of the Goswamis, especially Rupa, Sanatan and their nephew Jiva, is simply astonishing. The reader will find quotes in the Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta from an endless array of Sanskrit texts. The Goswamis clearly demonstrate that propagating a devotionality that culminates in intoxicated emotional states of Krishna Bhav is not, as some of their critics supposed, an inferior type of religiosity suitable for unschooled emotional simpletons. Rupa and his colleagues stand out amongst the intellectual giants of the entire history of the Indian scholasticism. Rupa's work is also an excellent example of traditional hermeneutics. The essential underlying principle of such hermeneutics, as Rupa notes with reference to the Kurma Puran, is that when there appear to be contradictions between differing scriptures or even differing sections within a scripture, one should not consider one to be incorrect, but rather one should seek an elucidation that reconciles the two statements. The exegetical ingenuity and mastery Rupa demonstrates in scriptural substantiating the amazingly intricate but wondrous vision of an unlimited Godhead and his primary manifestations as revealed by Sri Chaitanya and sheer scope of Sanskrit literature he brings to bear on his task have few precedents in the entire Sanskrit literary tradition. It is very gratifying to see the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust take on the task of publishing the primary texts of the Gaudiya tradition at such a high standard of scholarship. Gopi Pranadhan's Sanskrit is superb, and his commentary based on that of Baladev Vidyabhushan is erudite and written very much in the mood, style and tone of traditional commentators, engaging the Purva Paksha, that is the opposing point of view, but free of sectarianism and polemics. While this volume will naturally be of great interest to ISKCON members seeking access to the intellectual writings of their founding fathers, publications of this quality can transcend their own in-house readership and be of interest to the greater scholarly community as well as the educated lay public. When they are written in a scholarly idiom, the six Goswamis wrote a vast body of work in order to preserve and propagate Sri Chaitanya's teachings for posterity. The BBT has risen to the occasion of producing a high-quality edition of an important Gaudiya text that approaches the academic standards of scholarship of our day and age, just as the Goswamis committed themselves to doing in accordance with the scholarly milieu of their own times. This level of publication thus provides a great resource for all students and scholars of religion. The possibility of the BBT becoming not just a publishing house for preaching literature, but also the go-to source for outstanding scholarly editions of the Gaudiya classics for academics and the larger intellectual community is a very welcome prospect. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada stressed repeatedly that he wanted these books to be appreciated by the intelligentsia. Publications of the standard of this Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta are an impressive and very welcome step in that direction. And this foreword was written by Edwin Bryant, Professor of Hindu Religion and Philosophy at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And now let's start the preface of Śrīla Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta of Śrīla Rupa Goswami by Gopi Pranadhan Prabhu. Preface. Medieval India saw a dynamic and far-reaching efflorescence of popular devotion to Lord Krishna, sometimes called the Bhakti Renaissance. This movement was largely propagated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 1486 to 1534 AD, whom the faithful accept as Lord Krishna himself, manifested in the form of a devotee who taught the chanting of his own names. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly inspired in his followers a tremendous outpouring of works in Sanskrit, in philosophy and theology, as well as devotional songs, poetry, drama, a hagiography. The Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta is one such theological work by Śrīla Rupa Goswami, a chief disciple of Lord Chaitanya and one of the most important Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas, or the teachers. There is much in the present day that may be compared to that medieval India renaissance of Vaishnava Bhakti, and recent decades have also witnessed a similar explosion of devotion to Krishna. Though it is now worldwide, this was effected mainly by the foremost modern representative of the same Gaudiya tradition. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, popularly known as ISKCON, and also popularly known as Hare Krishna movement. When Śrīla Rupa Goswami authored the Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta in the 16th century, there was a great need to prove that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Most Vaishnavas accepted Lord Vishnu as the original form of the Supreme Lord, considering Krishna merely one of his avatars, albeit the most beloved of the Lord's many forms. Much has changed since Rupa Goswami wrote this book, but the need to demonstrate how Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead remains urgent today when so few believe in any God at all, much less in a God who is dark-complexioned, flute-playing cowherd boy named Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami herein provides a compelling scriptural exegesis of that assertion. In a modern world permeated by varieties of atheism, voidism, and impersonalism, this book thus has great relevance to the spiritual lives of all sincere seekers, especially aspiring devotees. The essential teachings of the Vedas are found in the Upanishads, whose philosophical content Vyasadeva codified as the Vedanta Sutras. While many Vaishnavas therefore focus their theological scholarship on these sutras, others consider Srimad Bhagavatam to be Vyasadeva's own commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. And thus the Bhagavatam has long been the paramount scripture for Vaishnavas, especially in North India. Its essential teachings are understood by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As understood by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is summarized in this traditional verse. Aradhyo Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayastad Dham Vrindavanam Ramya Kachid Upasana Vrajavadhu Vargena Yakalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pum Artho Mahan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matam Idam Tatradaro Nah Para. The Supreme Personality of Godhead to be worshipped is Krishna, the son of Vraja's king. His eternal abode is Vrindavan. The mode of worship most pleasing to him is that practiced by the women of Vraja. Srimad Bhagavatam is the pristine scriptural evidence, and pure love of Krishna is the highest object of mankind. This is the doctrine of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which we hold in utmost regard. The Brihad Bhāgavatāmrta of Śrīla Sanatana Gosvāmi, Rupa Goswami's elder brother and another chief disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, highlights the pure devotees mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam and the various forms of the Lord they worship, as well as their respective abodes, thus expanding the Bhagavatam's ocean of nectar. Srila Rupa Goswami composed Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta as a sequel to Brihad Bhāgavatāmrta, highlighting the Lord himself. In one sense, when the Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta is the crème de la crème of the Vedas, in that it focuses on the essential and primary truth known as Sambandha Gyan, preliminary understanding of the relationship between the Godhead and all his emanations. The Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta provides ample evidence about the multiforms of Godhead vis-a-vis Lord Krishna and his pure devotees, as the author writes in text 10. Now, by describing his various self-same forms one after another, I will show through appraisal of comparative excellence that Krishna is the most worshipable Supreme Lord. To consider this aim, we may look at one of the most important scriptural references for followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.28, cited at Laghu Bhāgavatāmrta 5.180. That verse follows a long list of incarnations and expansions of the Lord that are described in Vedic literature and contrasts them to Lord Krishna, whom it calls Swayam Bhagavan, the Lord's own personal form. Ete chamsha kalapumsa krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord, but Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, emphasizing Krishna's unique and primary position as a superlative original supreme personality of Godhead. Emphasizing Krishna's unique and primary position as a superlative, original Supreme Personality of Godhead, this verse is a foundational axiom of Gaudiya Vaishnava theology. Following Śrīla Jiva Gosvāmi in Krishna Sandarbha 29, Gaudiya Acharyas consider it as Paribhash Sutra or governing declaration of the Srimad Bhāgavatam. Gosvāmi 2012 142 footnote. Is it? I'll just say it just says FT here. I'll leave it there. It's just as encapsulated in the words Krishna Stu Bhagwan Swayam excuse me,